And welcome everybody to the 26th edition of the Deserve to Win podcast. As always, I'm your host, Eric J. Troutman, the Czar of the TCPA, the Czar of just about everything these days. Coming at you with like two brand new members of the team who we're going to introduce here momentarily. Before we get there, fantastic interview today. One of our best, I would say. Not for the kids though. A little bit of profanity, okay? We've got some adult language. You're going to have to watch out. But no, great interview with Joseph Kenney. He's the CEO of a company called Powersol USA, a small business, 14 employees that got sued by Avi Kaufman. And rather than roll over and settle the case, guess what this guy did? He fought back and he won. It's a fantastic story. You're going to want to hear about it. But before we get there, who do we have? Let's start with the lovely lady to my left.
Hi guys, my name is Brittany Andres. I'm also known as the Baroness of TCPA World, and I am a partner at Troutman & Mean LLP.
We are missing Queenie today.
We are. And Tori.
What happened to Queenie?
And the Dame.
And the Dame, yeah. So we're missing a couple of folks, but we do have the lovely Baroness. Always fantastic to be writing with you, Baroness. But in the place of Queenie and Tori, the Dame, we have a couple of new faces. They're brand new faces. You folks might not know them. First, who do we have?
Hi, I'm Matthew Hittrick. I am a new associate here at Troutman & Mean.
Yes, and you don't have a nickname, which is a problem. But we're going to develop a nickname. So little known fact, or maybe it's actually a widely known fact. Matt grew up in a farm, someplace where they have farms. What's this place where the farm was?
A little itty-bitty town in Nebraska.
Nebraska. So the state was called Nebraska. That's a real state. Look it up. And on this farm, you had a cow.
We had lots of cows, yes.
Thank you. I love cows. So you grew up on a dairy farm. So we're going to call you the farmer. I'm not sure we're really going to call you that, but maybe because I raised that for you before, and you were like, so like I'm a serf or something. Yeah. In the feudal system, So look, we're growing. We're adding a lot of cool people. We are very, very cautious with who we add. I think you're going to love Matt. I think you're going to like this person when we get to her. But they can't all get royal court names, right? Like we've got to really kind of be protective of that now. And I think you do. You have to start off as like a serf or like a squire or a farmer or something, and you have to work your way up. So you can take care of the royal heifers and provide milk to the royal court, and one day maybe you'll work your way up. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Okay, who do I have to my right?
Hi, I'm Seema. I just joined the firm. I'm a law clerk waiting for my bar results in November, which we're going to say that I've passed until then, and I also don't have a name.
Yeah, well, Seema, you don't get a name until you pass the bar. So yeah, she's here. So
I'm not going to argue with that.
So Seema is our first of a crop of four of what we're calling the class of 2024 of Troutman & Mean LLP. We're really super excited to have these incredibly well-qualified, intensely intelligent folks joining us. And Seema, I know that you're going to pass the bar. I'm going to like mess with you about it, but I know you're going to pass the bar. And Seema's claim to fame is not that she was a farmer, but that she likes to eat weird things. And in fact, she's like a zombie. You might be actually known as the zombie because you eat brains, is my understanding. Is this an accurate statement?
It is accurate.
Okay, can you just, like 30 seconds, explain about how you eat brains?
Okay, so I think a lot of cultures also have this.
No.
Where we eat the head of the sheep. It's actually something very, very beneficial. It's like bone marrow, you know?
Don't sell eating a brain. just explain that you eat a brain.
You eat the head.
You eat the head, but you don't. But like, okay.
Where the brain is at. The head where the brain is.
Well, there you go, folks. And that's how episode 26 of Deserve to Win opens up. All right, let's get to work, guys. There's lots to talk about. So two things. First, I want to talk about a huge victory, which is a kind of an unusual victory, which is robocalls in this country. People love talking about robocalls, but nobody is talking about the fact that robocalls are down for 7 consecutive months now in 2024 as compared to 2023. In fact, American consumers have received 2 billion less robocalls between January and July of 2024 as compared to the same period in 2023. 2 billion. And I'm going to tell you, you're welcome. Because if it wasn't for Eric J. Troutman, y'all would still be receiving those $2 billion and probably plus even more. Why? Because, of course, I'm the guy, along with my partner Pooja Amin, along with my partner Brittany Andres, we're out there on the stages, coast to coast, talking to the lead generation community, talking to the direct consumer marketing community, talking with our clients who are usually large-scale callers, and getting them to comply with the law, working with the FCC, and, of course, working with the trade organization REACH, Responsible Enterprises Against Consumer Harassment. Y'all remembered when I started this thing a year and a half ago, I told you we are going to stop robocalls. We're going to bring these robocall numbers down, and I had a very ambitious promise that we're going to do billions every year, and guess what? We are right on track. A lot more work to be done, but man, we are crushing. We are crushing. Congress, I'm waiting for my Medal of Honor. Like, what's going on? Joe Biden, guys, going to call me? No? Nobody? Seriously? I'm not going to lie. Like, I am the single most accomplished human being, I think, in America for the last, 365 days. But honestly, couldn't do it alone. Of course, that's not the way this works. It's the commitment of everybody that's part of REACH, the really good companies that really are trying to protect consumers, do things the right way, meet the highest possible standards, and stop the unwanted calls, right? I mean, it's not good for anybody. It's not good for anybody. And we want the lead generation industry to survive. We want small businesses to be able to have a source of being able to be connected with consumers who need their services. Small businesses remain the lifeblood, like the superpower of our economy. And if these guys dry up, if there's no way for them to be connected with consumers and the big boys win all the time, that's not good for anybody. So really, really proud of the work that REACH has done, proud and happy to be working with all you great companies. If you're not a member of REACH, hopefully Zane will give me like a big splash, REACH right here. Visit reachmbc.com. Find out how you can join, be part of the solution, and consumers really like to work with REACH members because they know these are companies that take their privacy very seriously, and that's something that everybody really likes these days. So anyway, there you go. That's the first thing. It's huge. It's great news. You all should be very proud of yourself. I do not know why nobody is talking about this but me. I mean, it's a huge story. 7 consecutive months of robocalls being down, 2 billion less robocalls this year over last year. No one's talking about it. Very strange, very strange. I think the news just likes to talk about negative things. I like to talk about positive things. So there you go. That's the news. Other big story is, of course, the Loper Bright Supreme Court decision. This is going to have massive ramifications kind of throughout the TCPA world and really throughout the entire legal world. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Those of you that went to the Law Conference of Champions, oh my God, we haven't talked about that yet. LCOC, absolutely fantastic event. Oh my God, we just blew it out of the water. So much positive feedback. It was like the greatest thing that anyone's ever attended. I'm going to be honest with you. We've gone to a conference since. Our conference is so much better than a regular conference. Like we had cookies and milk in the afternoon. For God's sake, like cookies and milk. You can't beat that. Zane is back here nodding. Yeah, cookies and milk. I mean, it's huge. But in seriousness, LCOC went fantastic. But at that presentation, I talked quite a bit about Loper Bright and the death of something called Chevron deference. And really, when you think about the death of Chevron deference, what you should be thinking about is the death of certainty in the law. Because unfortunately, y'all listening to me keep voting for people into Congress who aren't attorneys, and as a result, our laws are terrible because we're having our laws written by bartenders and chefs and whoever the hell else you guys are electing to Congress. Look, I love y'all, but stop. Just knock it off. So we have really bad laws. And that's been okay-ish because we've had agencies that are full of, generally speaking, pretty smart lawyers that went to Harvard and Yale and actually are trying to get to the right answer. And so Congress passes a bad, vague, stupid law, and then the agencies have been able to what they call gap fill and interpret that law and provide guidance to the courts and to America in terms of what that law, which is badly worded, actually means in practice. And so at least when we have these agencies, what some folks would call these nameless bureaucrats writing our laws for us, at least we know what the laws are now. So some might say it's not a good thing. I thought Chevron deference was a great thing because it provided uniformity all across the country. Now that Chevron deference is dead, and that's what the Supreme Court held in a case called Loper Bright, what that means is these agency determinations in terms of what the meaning of a law is are no longer binding. That means every single judge out there is allowed to make his or her own determination as to what the law is. And that's bad. That's really bad. Why? Because you want to know what the law is before you get to court, don't you? You want to know if you're complying with the law before you do something that might be illegal. And you certainly don't want to find out that you broke the law only after a judge swings his gavel and says, I think you broke the law because I'm interpreting the law in a way that makes what you thought was legal illegal. And this is really important to the FCC and to the TCPA world because, of course, as we all know, the TCPA is a terribly worded statute, horrible, so vague, so difficult to apply. And the FCC has spent literally since 2003? 1992 was the first FCC order, so it's been over 30 years that they've been interpreting the statute. But you've seen a lot of activity since 2008 in particular, several declaratory rulings, several rulemaking proceedings. So now you have a body of law that's both the TCPA, the very thick CFR provisions, 47 CFR 64-1200, and then probably 500 to 600 pages of FCC rulings interpreting the statute over the last couple of dozen years. And that last piece, right, those interpretive rulings have really been the bedrock that the courts in the case law have looked to, and all of that is now out the window potentially. And it's really very, very fascinating to see how courts are now going to move forward interpreting the TCPA when a large body of the FCC's handiwork is now going to be out the window. But we have to pause because unlike most agencies, not all of the FCC's work is going to be out the window. The FCC and the Atomic Energy Commission have really, really very powerful powers. Why not? Granted to them under something called the Hobbs Act. And under the Hobbs Act, courts cannot mess with an FCC determination under the Communications Act. The TCPA falls within the Communications Act. So at least some things that the FCC does are still going to be protected from the courts quibbling through something called the Hobbs Act. The problem is that according to a different Supreme Court ruling, this time in something called PDR Resources, not every FCC ruling is going to be entitled to Hobbs Act deference. Only final legislative rulings and not mere interpretive orders are going to be entitled to that heightened level of deference. Problem is, which ones of the TCPA rulings of the FCC fall into which bucket? And I'm going to tell you, the answer is not always clear because the commission works really hard and they've got some really smart lawyers there, but not everything they do fits so neatly into one bucket or the other. So everything that was solid is now kind of melting into air to a certain degree here in TCPA world. The one thing I think that is pretty solid, though, is the one-to-one rule. Unfortunately, the new modified express consent definition for express written consent in the lead gen context, that rule is set to go into effect in January of 2025. And I will tell you, I believe the APA NPRM rules were strictly followed. So I believe this will be a final legislative ruling. I believe it will be entitled to Hobbs Act deference and will become the law of the land. But so many other FCC determinations under the TCPA are now up for grabs. Are text messages calls? Can you still get express consent when you just receive a phone call, or when you receive a phone number from the consumer without any other, trappings of consent? There's a lot of rulings that have come out in interpretive settings that it's unclear to me that this is still going to be the law. So lots of really fun and exciting times here as we all try to adjust to this new Loper Bright decision. But again, the FCC and the TCPA world is only just one small piece of the ramifications of this very, very significant Supreme Court ruling. So that's what I've got. Let's throw it around. We will start with you, Matt, the farmer. What do you got for us today?
Whatever.
The surf?
Yeah. So recently, July 19th of 2024, down in the 11th Circuit, Lawson v. VisionWorks came out, and essentially in the healthcare industry, so obviously not as broad as Loper, but in a very niche kind of area, we had text messages that were sent out regarding upcoming appointments. So essentially, not like overall, but if you have you're due for another exam. Okay. They also had a link with that you could schedule an exam. The ruling came out that those are considered solicitations because the healthcare provider gains a benefit and there's no consent with those. So it really kind of narrows down on the exceptions that are in the healthcare field and how those play out. So essentially, those do require consent, and you can't just be sending out specific text messages for upcoming yearly exams without prior approval.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting ruling because there's actually two healthcare exemptions. One is, of course, for critical healthcare information, which this was not going to qualify as. And critical healthcare information, you actually don't need any level of consent as a provider to send those out. So that's one exemption. The second exemption is the information about health-related services exemption, which would essentially take what would otherwise be a marketing communication and turn it into an informational communication, essentially allowing these communications to be made with only express consent as opposed to with express written consent. And the punchline in this case was they didn't have any express consent.
Correct.
So the exemption, even if it worked in their favor, wouldn't help them because it's not a complete exemption. And that's something that healthcare providers need to understand. So many of these healthcare providers, and I know a lot of you folks do tune into the show, believe, I think erroneously, that any message seeking to set an appointment or a reminder to pick up some medication, that they're automatically going to fall into the broader healthcare exemption, but they don't. They don't. You have a narrower exemption and you still have to have a level of consent. You can't just do a cold solicitation. If you do, that's going to be a D&C violation. And that's what these folks faced in that case. Great job, Farmer Matt. I appreciate the breakdown. Very, very good. Let's throw it over to the Brain Eater. What do we got?
Yeah. This is actually a recent case that you also wrote a blog about.
That's how it works around here.
It is whether a TCPA claim can survive a plaintiff's death.
Ooh.
And guess what?
It's dark.
It does.
All right.
Oh, well. And that's because the court looked at whether this kind of a claim is a remedial claim or a penal claim, and it basically, I'm going to make it really simple, it basically came down to saying that a TCPA claim, if it's like, since it hurts the public, because it hurts the public, it becomes a remedial measure, and therefore it doesn't extinguish at the death of the plaintiff, and it survives the death of the plaintiff. So yeah.
It's an interesting ruling. So the case law on this, first of all, it's a very dark topic, and of course, this is what you would choose. Like if your first breakdown, the first term my viewers get to hear from you, and it's like you're talking about someone dying, Seema.
Yeah,
That's dark. That's dark. You're like the witch. You're gonna be the witch, maybe. No, the Brain Eater. We're gonna say the Brain Eater. So the courts have struggled with this, and I remember the first couple of cases that came out on this topic, like 2017, 2018, held, in fact, that TCPA cases did not survive death because they were viewed as criminal or quasi-penal in nature because the penalty was so much higher, right, than the actual loss that's occasioned by a phone call. $500 minimum up to $1,500, right, as compared to like the 30 cents or 5 cents or 0 cents of damage that an unwanted phone call may actually cause. But as time has gone on, courts have reevaluated that assessment, and this court pointed out correctly that I think the majority rule now is that these TCPA cases are remedial. They're designed, the statutory penalties are designed to make you whole for something that you have lost, and not merely to punish the caller. Now, I disagree with that analysis. I don't think I don't think that there's any conceivable nexus between a $500 minimum penalty and the actual damage that I have suffered. If I get a phone call, that $500 isn't to compensate me for my 1 second of distraction. And by the way, my billable hourly rate is very high, but it's not $500 per second, okay? So not even Eric J. Troutman's time is worth $500 per second. I don't know, maybe it is, but not the market rate currently. So to say that just like the average Joe is losing $500 because they're distracted for 1 second, that's just not true. And so in my view, the courts have largely been kind of gilding the lily to get to this result. I don't think there's really much thought going into this. I say this with love. These are highly intelligent judges with great clerks working for them, but these are, in my view, these are result-oriented determinations, right? If you looked at this in isolation without knowing what the result would be and just asked yourself logically, is this a penal or remedial penalty? Plainly, it's a penalty. It is penal. It is not remedial. But because the outcome of that decision determines whether or not the plaintiff can pursue the case, they're coming to the opposite conclusion. So there you go. Another court holds TCPA plaintiff can sue after they're dead.
Yes, you can. Check out more on the blog.
Very good. Welcome to the podcast, Seema. All right, last but not least, the lovely and powerful Baroness. What do we got?
So I have a case, Ingram versus Money Map Press. That's like a tongue twister. Money Map Press. The defendant filed a motion to dismiss for lack of personal jurisdiction. A defendant can't be sued everywhere. So you can demonstrate jurisdiction in two ways. There's general jurisdiction and specific jurisdiction. General jurisdiction refers to where the person resides. Like, we live in California, so we could probably be sued here, right? And then specific jurisdiction looks at whether the defendant purposely availed themselves of the benefits of that jurisdiction. So in TCPA cases, a defendant can generally be sued everywhere where it places calls, but not if they did not know where the calls were being placed. So in this case, the call was made to a Las Vegas telephone number, but the defendant was a Maryland company, but the suit was filed in California. So of course the defendant argued that it should not be subject to personal jurisdiction in this court, and the court agreed. Unfortunately, though, the plaintiff can sue in either Las Vegas or Maryland where jurisdiction exists, but for now, at least, the case is dismissed in California.
Yeah, so that's the irony, of course, is that you get out of California, but you could get sued in Nevada.
Right.
Which, on the one hand, begs the question is why you would do it, but honestly, look, jurisdiction is very personal. It's a very important thing. You do not want to waive jurisdiction. Maybe the Ninth Circuit's got a bad ruling, or that particular judge wasn't great, or that district wasn't great. In my view, generally speaking, you always want to keep jurisdictional arguments in your pocket. There might be an instance where you waive jurisdiction because there's something very positive about where you're being sued. I could see that. But unless you've got a really positive reason to be in that jurisdiction, you want to be in your home court if you can, if you can do that. And I can give you a list of 50 cases that were decided positively for a defendant because they were in their home court getting fat on home cooking versus somewhere across the country where really these judges don't care about them at all. Just think about it. If you're a major employer in California, right, you want to defend yourself in California. You want to defend yourself in Florida or West Virginia or someplace where they just don't really care what happens to your company. And it's true all over the country. So that's really something to keep in mind. And great breakdown, by the way, Baroness. Very nicely done. All right, hope you all enjoyed that. Now, as promised, we're going to get to the only for the adult language, folks. Only for no children. Children go to bed. Interview with our fantastic guest. Through the power of the Troutman Amin LLP law firm, we bring you our interview with Joseph Kenney, CEO of Powersol USA. Enjoy. And now, through the power of Troutman Amin LLP, we are so happy and fortunate to bring you a little exclusive interview with the CEO of Powersol USA, Mr. Joseph Kenney. Welcome to the show, man.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, and you've got a great story that I know our listeners and watchers cannot wait to hear. But before we kind of dive into it, why don't you give us a little bit of your background, kind of, who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, so my name's Joseph Kenney. I own Powersol USA, which is a solar company. I've been in business doing phone calls, lead gen from the Philippines to the U.S. 2018, I got into just doing my own leads. 2019, when they changed all the laws, just doing my own leads, doing everything in-house, no third parties, and I got caught up in some TCPA compliance while being compliant.
Yeah, so because you've been doing this for like 6-7 years, like you were saying, or maybe 5 years, and you hadn't had any problems in the past, right? Like, how many calls had you made in a lawful way without anybody kind of bothering you?
There were times in 2015, 2016 that we were making like 1 million calls a day in a huge call center and never had a problem. And then when I went to one person calling, and making maybe 100 calls a day to people that opted in is when I got in trouble.
It's interesting. So Powersol, you guys are focused primarily on solar, that vertical, is that right?
Yeah, correct.
And historically, have you always been in solar, or have you done some other things in the past?
Yeah, I was a copywriter, and I did, I got into Facebook early, lead gen. I owned a call center, and when they changed all the laws and everything, I was over in the Philippines. I came back over here, and I was doing leads for solar companies. and I found some guy that, he was making like 50 grand a month from my leads. And I'm like, well, I can find a bunch of, Jamals or whatever the guy's name was. So I started Powersol USA thinking it was a lot easier than it. And, everything we go into, we think it's super easy. And then we get into it. And, it's, when you start navigating the waters a little bit more difficult. But, it's always been around leads and lead generation. And then it just led me into solar. Started doing sales and then moved into doing our own installs. So I've been in solar for a long time, considering most of the other companies have been out of business or whatnot.
Yeah. So you came to my attention. I got to tell you, really, really fascinating email I received from you, Joseph. Kind of written like a press release. I don't know, maybe it was a press release. And you gave a very scathing assessment, which I appreciate, of a certain very well-known TCPA plaintiff's attorney. And look, folks, we're going to be talking quite a bit about some allegations, and I'm not saying that anything Joseph has to say here today is true. I can't independently verify it. But it's a really interesting story. It's a really interesting story for those of you who feel like you're being shaken down by some of these sharks, these very powerful plaintiffs lawyers in the TCPA space. And so I think it's an important voice. I think it's somebody that you folks should hear from. And so tell me, just kind of give me the experience, Joseph, just kind of at the high level, who was this big plaintiff shark that you had to deal with, and how did you get caught with the guy in the first place?
Yeah, so it's funny you ask that. So I got one guy making phone calls, and we had a 1099 contractor sales guy that came in, and he handed my scheduling manager like 4 or 5 contacts, and he makes a call to some guy, a guy in Miami, and the first phone, he's like, I'm calling on behalf of XYZ, from Powersol USA, his name, everything to be TCPA compliant. And, the guy's like, oh yeah, I remember, I remember that guy, blah, blah, blah. And they, so he schedules another callback. And then it goes on for like a month. It was only 4 calls, a total of like 12 minutes. And, it was on our lead list, and I was like, hey, what happened with this guy? And then the same day I was asking about him, I get a letter in the mail, and I open up and I see like, this class action lawsuit. Like, the first thing I see is $5 million, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like, seriously? And then I start Googling, like, I was ready to rip it up and throw it in the trash. May as well file it in the fiction section at the library. But anyways, so I didn't throw it in the trash. I started looking into like, TCPA laws and things like that. I came across your page, and the first site I come across is the top 10 rankings, and I was like, oh, this name looks oh fuck. And it was the big number 2. And it was. I knew it was going to be a fight from that point on.
Yeah. So you ended up tangling with Mr. Avi Kaufman. Very, very powerful, very intelligent, thoughtful. Sometimes a little erratic litigator out of South Florida, and he caught you in, what kind of case was this? Was this like a pre-recorded call case, a DNC case? I know it was a TCPA case, but like what exactly was the allegation? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was a class action, TCPA, FTSA, federal class action lawsuit. So
he wanted a few $1 million from you, and you're an interesting guy, because I think most folks when they're faced with this kind of litigation, especially with a guy like Kaufman, I think they look to settle. Now, we've got a lot of clients that love to fight. We're going to have a couple of those clients on the podcast here pretty soon. And look, we love clients that fight. They come to us because they want to fight. Very few people call me because they want to settle a case. Sometimes it does happen, but mostly if you're calling Troutman and me and you want to fight, and you were in a very similar situation, you decided you were going to fight this thing.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think I even shot you an email, after like going through it. I actually lost a couple attorneys are like, no, we don't want to take this case. No, we don't want to take it. And I thought it was like a joke at first. I was like, maybe this guy can't read. I don't know. Cause like in Florida, you're licensed for only the state of Florida. So in electrical, so you have to be licensed in other states. I'm like, we're not even licensed in other states. How is there such an enormous amount of calls that, it's going to add up to $5 million? But anyway, long story short, most attorneys wouldn't take it. The first attorney I did, I had ate up through like 10 or 15 grand, like in like 2 weeks. And he's just, all he kept saying is settlement. And I'm like, no, dude. If I did something wrong, I would surely settle. But I didn't do anything wrong. So, so we ended up losing that attorney, got in an argument, and he left. We ended up getting like a summary judgment against us. I had to call Avi to get an extension, and I got into an argument on the phone with him. I kept telling him, like, you got the wrong guy, man. You got the wrong guy. And anyways, I found this attorney out of someone gave me out of Coral Gables, and I called him at like 9:00 at night. His name's Andy Show, and I begged him. I'm like, dude, I'm getting railroaded. Please take this case. I can't find anybody else that's either licensed in Miami or whatever, the Southern District of Florida. Please take this case. And he's like, I don't, his words were like, I don't like to see people getting fucked, and it sounds like you're getting fucked. So I'm going to do you a solid. I'm going to take this case. But he's like, don't fuck me. Like, I promise I won't. He's like, I don't want to find some big dialer in your office that's, the size of a car. And I'm like, no, I promise you, it was one guy. We didn't, and he's like, so, a lot of it was me using AI and, the long language, legal language model like the ChatGPT, and coming up with like, putting in different cases, different TCPA, reading your articles, researching and kind of bringing it back to them and saying, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And over the past 10 months, we got into a lot of arguments. And finally, he said, why don't we just settle? He comes up with it. I said, I don't care what it costs me. I'm not paying $1 of this guy's Lambo payment. I ain't paying him shit. I'll pay you before I pay him. So, no. Like, if I felt I did something, I would, then we can talk a settlement. But, like, I'm not. And so from that point on, he just, they went back and forth for a little bit. And, Andy Schoen is actually he's a really good guy, really good attorney, turned out. And, he just sent me an email, said, congratulations, case is over.
Yeah, and so that's the punchline, man. That's what I love about this story, right? Here you are, a small guy, right? And you get this big shark comes and tries to take a bite out of you, and you refuse to give up, man. You refuse to give up. You say you didn't do anything wrong. And you're going around, you're looking for counsel. You say you reached out to me. I don't remember that. I'm going to be honest with you, Joseph. I don't remember that. But you reached out to some lawyers, and you had a tough time finding one. You finally found one who took you on. And you fought for 10 months. And that's the punchline, is that you won. Avi walked away and dismissed the case for nothing. You didn't pay him a penny, did you?
I didn't pay him. No, I wasn't going. I mean, I was going to take it all the way, and that was. Everyone was telling me, it's going to be so expensive. So there's another solar company that the same plaintiff, same defense, or same plaintiff, same attorney, and it even had some of the same people in it, honestly. But I called that attorney, and she's like, "Oh, just settle." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't want to settle. I want," and she's like, all he's going to do is suffocate you, eat up all your resources. and you're going to end up paying him in the end. And I said, no, I'm not. Do you want a W against this guy? Because we're going to win. And she's like, I'll pay you. You can pay me to do a settlement. I'm like, no. But it was the same case that she had settled with, and pretty much the same people are involved. But it was just ironic how everything, you just got to go through the whole process. It's mentally draining, emotionally draining. I don't feel like I won at all. I feel like, it feels good to know that I took on Goliath but it's like, at the end of the day, it still cost me probably $200,000 in lost business, just not to mention thousands of hours of my time where I could have been working on my business.
And Joseph, that's why I wanted to have you on this on this podcast, right? Because we talk to the FCC all the time. We deal with the Small Business Administration. We try to help the SBA. We try to help the regulators to understand that the TCPA, by and large, is being abused. It's being abused by lawyers who are just out there to just extort people, file suits. By the way, I'm not saying that's what Avi did here, right? I'm just using you as...
I'll go ahead and say that's what you did.
You can say that. You can say that. I'm not going to say that, but it might be, right? I'm using you, right, as a vehicle, as an example to show that, look, you're a small business, right? How many employees do you have, man? Do you mind if I ask you that?
Yeah, we have 14 employees.
You have 14 employees. I mean, I don't want to get too personal, but I assume your revenue is under $50 million a year, maybe under $10 million a year. Where are you at?
Yeah, we're 13.
Right, so you're a company that's doing $13 million a year, you've got 14 employees, and you've got a big shark coming after you when you haven't done anything wrong, right? And he expects, this is what these plaintiffs' lawyers expect. They expect that you're going to write him a check. And look, the check might be $50K, the check might be $100K, the check might be $200K, who's to say, right? But he expects that you're going to write him a check. And you say, no, I don't care how much it costs me, maybe it's going to cost me more than the $50K that I could have written a check for and been out of the case, but I'm going to fight this. But the regulators need to understand that for every Joseph that there are 100, call them more practical business people, who will say, if it's going to cost me 10 months of my life and $200,000 and leave me drained, I'd rather just write a check even though I didn't do anything wrong. And that is what the plaintiff's bar is banking on. The plaintiff's bar banks on guys like Joseph not doing what he did, on them just rolling over and writing a check. And that's why, Joseph, someone like you, man, you're kind of like a hero in a weird way. I'm not going to come out and just say you're a firefighter or, someone in the military hero level, but from a certain perspective you are, because, if people stood up when they were being wrongly accused of these cases, there wouldn't be so many of these cases. There wouldn't be so much exploitation. There wouldn't be so much abuse. So I really love it when a guy like you, and we've had others on the show that have done the same thing. We've got many clients that do the same thing. Stand up and say, we're not going to write that check. And the fact that you walked away with that victory, that Avi, and I'll be honest with you, I talked to Avi about this before this podcast, and man, he. You got under his skin. I will give you that. You got under his skin. So you feel drained emotionally. I'm going to tell you, I think he's going to lose a little bit of sleep over this. And when he watches this podcast, he probably just threw something at the screen and said, "God damn you, Troutman." But it's true. The fact that you were able to walk away from this with a victory and with your head held high, I think that's great. And I don't know your attorney, but I think he did a great job too, from what I'm hearing. And so my hat's off to him. I commend him for taking on this case and for assisting you in doing so in a deft and effective manner. I just think that's great.
Yeah, we both became experts at TCPA and class action and TCPA law. Of course, I had, it was always on my mind. That's all I was thinking about was this, I had $5 million hanging over me. And, so I was doing some serious research on, it was, and I kept saying it's based on principle. On principle, I'm going to fight this. And I even told him the first time that I talked to him, Avi, I said, dude, if I did something wrong, we talk about a settlement. And then he sent me an offer in the beginning. He's like, "Oh, settlement's expensive." I'm like, I'm going to keep my stance and say no. And I wish the FCC had somewhere that you could go to, a small business that is practical, makes logical sense. Like, hey, I'm a solar company that takes a licensed electrician, a master electrician license. This license is only held in one state, yet I have a national class action lawsuit. The whole thing just doesn't make sense to me. But
Yeah, I wish there were more resources available for small businesses like yours. But again, you do have one resource. You did have one angel on your shoulder, and of course that was me, right? TCPAworld.com. But did you find my little website to be helpful?
oh yeah, well, it was at first when I see I'm fighting number two, the number two, whatever you want to call it, on the power rankings, and I'll tell you what, ChatGPT has a lot of good information, but it's a lot of bullshit. So you have to cross-reference it through your stuff and verify this case and that case. And you probably had a lot of Google pings from Tampa, Florida.
Oh, look, man, we get hundreds of thousands of hits. We are a resource that's used all across the country from folks that are staffers in the legislatures and in Congress, the FCC, the FTC, big firms. We've got half the AmLaw 100 follows TCPAworld.com, and of course, small people like you and other lawyers, right? And that's why we put out all this content. That's why I spend every day, hours of my time putting out free content with no gates, no barriers. You don't have to subscribe. You just get the information for free anytime you want, because I'm literally trying to help people. And so when I hear a story like yours, and I know that you're out there leveraging an LLM on TCPA World saying, write it like the Czar, I love that, man. I love that, and I'm glad that you and your counsel were able to make good use of it. All right, man, we're going to wrap up the interview. Anything else that you want to say here at the end? You've got the whole wide TCPA world watching.
I mean, if you believe in something, if you believe you're wrongfully accused, then just fight it. Because at the end of the day, it's principles. It's going to say settlement, and that's still a bad rap. So, if you believe in something, fight it.
I love it, man. That's how you deserve to win, man. You fight, and you fight the good cause. Appreciate you, Joseph. Thanks very much for being on the show, man. Great job.
You guys have a good one.
Wow. I know I called the guy a hero. Maybe that was a little bit over exaggerated there. But honestly, I really do respect a small business guy, a guy who obviously doesn't have that many resources. I mean, I'm not saying the guy's impoverished or anything, but he's not a wealthy individual, small business, and he obviously could have done what so many businesses do and just roll over and settle these cases. And you hear these stories all the time. We see it every day, right, of cases that are largely shakedown lawsuits. And I want to be clear. I mean, there are some legitimate TCPA lawsuits. I'm not trying to say that every single TCPA lawsuit is a shakedown, but a lot of them are. I mean, just a ton of them are. And so when you see a small business willing to fight, really willing to put money ahead of principle or principle ahead of money, I think it's a wonderful thing. But let's throw it around. Matt, my farmer. I know we played with dairy cows earlier today, but what did you think, man? First of all, what did you think of the podcast, and then what did you think of this guy?
Oh, so podcast's great. I mean, it's super informative. It's nice to be a part of it officially, as opposed to just viewing. But as far as the story, the fact that you've got a small business owner that's willing to fight and put down a lot of money to make sure on principle that they aren't wronged, and especially taking on the number two in the power rankings when that's such a simple solution to just roll over and resolve it. I mean, it's like you said, hours and hours of time you could spend on so much else, but to have that drive to say, I did nothing wrong and I will be vindicated, I think is such a strong story.
And that's why I want to have him on the podcast, right? Because if someone like this fights and just no one hears about it, it just happens in obscurity, then it's what did he get out of it, right? It's almost as if he kind of wasted his time. It's almost as if he made the wrong decision. And so I want to draw attention to that. I want him to be applauded. I want people to recognize that, if you do fight and win, give me a call. I want to hear about this. And I'm really glad he reached out to me.
Yeah.
Well, look, man, you did a great job today. It's wonderful to have you at the firm. Matt, you've been just a huge addition. We're going to have to come up with a nickname for you other than Farmer Matt, although we might stick with Farmer Matt. It might just be Farmer Matt for life. I don't know. We're going to find out. We now have Big Hen Henson. You're going to hear about that later. But so we got Farmer Matt. But great job today, man. I really appreciate it. Good thoughts. Seema.
Yes.
Lovely Seema. What did you think?
It was really informative. He explained his story so well. He explained how he was hit with this case and how when you get something like this in the mail, like anybody would look at it and be like, what is this? I don't want to deal with this. And just throw it in the trash, like he said. But he didn't do that. Instead, he took the mail. He's like, let me see what this TCPA is all about. Because it's not something that's, not everyone's informed about it. And obviously, like, I wasn't well informed about it until I read your blogs and like how you discuss things. And I think that's really informative. And that's what he did. And honestly, he accomplished something amazing. He didn't give up. And we live in a world that is just so cruel. When you see something like this and it gets harder, you just give up and write that check and stuff. But he's like, nope, I'm not going to do that. And honestly, he has an amazing story. So it's amazing that you were able to bring him in.
Yeah, it was a good time. I mean, look, he's not a brain eater like you, but he's a fantastic guy, and it was good to have you.
Yes,
did you have a nice time on your first podcast?
I did. Yes, I really enjoyed it. I was listening. I was like, wow, okay, and what else happened? It's like a story. I love it.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to have you. You did a great job today, and honestly, I know that you're here and you're going to be awaiting those bar results. Obviously, we have really high expectations for you, and if you fail, we're going to fire you. So it's not a problem. You're going to do a great job. I'm very confident that everything's going to go well. But thanks so much for being here. All right, Baroness, my stand-in for the lovely Queenie. I can never compare the two of you. I know both of you don't like that, so I'm not going to make any statement that's
Well, we're both typically here, so I'm not a stand-in.
That's what I'm saying. Well, no, you're a stand-in. Well, that's okay. Touche. You're doing both. You're in both roles today. You're both partners in one, Queenie and Baroness together. So, oh yeah, can you imagine that, Queenie and Baroness together? Okay. So, what did you think, though? In all seriousness.
Yeah, so when you said Avi Kaufman involved Avi Kaufman, it obviously fascinated me right out of the gate because we've dealt with Avi before in previous cases that we have, and we know that he's an aggressive litigator. He's not like other plaintiffs' counsels that kind of just mosey on with the case. He likes to fight as well. So when we had Joe on the podcast and he started speaking about how he had a call center in the Philippines and he was making compliant calls, I was honestly a little skeptical at first because is he really making compliant calls? Because people that don't make compliant calls always say that their calls are compliant, right? But as he told his case more and more, I honestly, like all of you guys, I had more respect for him because, one, he couldn't find anybody to take the case. I wish he came to us because we are fighters as well, so we would have had a lot of fun with that.
The truth is, though, we're really expensive, right? And it kind of feels to me like he found a guy that was willing to take this case at kind of a lower rate. And so I'm saying, I don't know this lawyer, but good for you, man. Good for you. I'm sorry, keep going.
Yeah, so, no one would take his case. He finally found someone. He said he even had to beg that guy to take it. He eventually took it, and then even when he found an attorney to take it, he was still doing his research. He was doing his due diligence, which we really like to see when clients are involved in their case as well and doing their own separate research apart from the attorneys. He was checking on TCPA rules, which we love, and using his own resources. So honestly, his whole story was really amazing, and I respect him for it.
It's great. I love feeling, whether it's accurate or not, feeling like where I'm kind of empowering people to be able to defend themselves and fight for themselves and to comply with the law, right? So, one of the things we talked about earlier is, of course, robocalls continue to drop, right? 7 consecutive months of robocalls dropping, and that is absolutely the Troutman-Amin effect. That is absolutely reach, right, as we've talked about before. But secondary to stopping unwanted robocalls and empowering people to actually follow the law, we're also empowering people to defend themselves. And so that was another thing I found really, really fascinating, not just in it's David versus Goliath, and it was, right? Seriously, let's be real. We're talking about a guy with very limited resources. I don't know this lawyer, but he kind of just sounds like some state court lawyer, and I don't want to be mean. I don't want to tear him down, but like you could imagine, like in my mind, kind of like a movie of like the slick Avi Kaufman, and then maybe like the not so slick lawyer that was begged to take on the case and was like, fine, I'm going to take it on to protect you. Again, I don't know the guy. He could be actually really slick. I don't know, but that's how I imagine the situation. And here's the guy using my blog, right, to basically ghostwrite briefs and to make arguments and use ChatGPT to try to help his own lawyer. I mean, I love this story. I would love to see a movie about this, right? Like these are the kinds of things that really kind of sparked my imagination. So when he reached out, I just knew I had to have the guy on. I love the story, and I hope that all of you love the story as well. But that's it, guys. I hope that you really enjoyed this, and we, of course, love you. It's been a heck of a time. LCOC was fantastic. ASE was fantastic. We're going to get back on the road in September. We'll see you in Chicago. We'll see you in Austin. We'll see you in Salt Lake City. Lots more road tripping for us. But until we get there, thank you so much for being part of this, our 26th edition of the Deserve to Win podcast. We'll see you later. Bye, everybody.